Good afternoon, guys. Welcome. Today we're talking about why you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved and why it hurts so much. Some of you are exhausted, not because you don't care, but because you care too much. Thank you. About people who won't change, or maybe they don't feel like they can actually change. Let me tell you a story about welcome, Debjit. Welcome, Mamam, Rashid. Good afternoon. So today we're talking about the wounded bird pattern. And a lot of people are attracted to wounded birds because they see the potential. They want to actually help others. Maybe they themselves have experienced trauma, and so they want to help someone work through that. Ultimately, that can be a hard thing to manage because the other issue with it is the fact that sometimes people just don't want to change for whatever reason. Maybe they've experienced a lot of trauma. Maybe they've experienced a lot of pain. Maybe they feel like, welcome from United Arab Emirates. And so that can be difficult to navigate that because sometimes trauma has a lot of wounds that people can't see. For instance, they think that they're not worthy of being able to change. They think that it will be more difficult. Maybe they don't have the family structure that they need. Maybe they don't have the support system that they need. And so it is a lot harder than what some people may think, especially if you're suffering from some sort of addiction or some other thing layered with trauma. And ultimately, a lot of people that are suffering from addiction, that generally comes from trying to essentially kind of soothe a wound that they have that they can't really reach, because emotional pain oftentimes is harder than physical pain because it's built up again and again and again and again. And so ultimately, wounded birds are people who have experienced trauma and are almost kind of stuck. They can also be people who want to do better, but essentially they don't know how, right? For whatever reason. Maybe they weren't taught, maybe they weren't supported in childhood, maybe there's childhood trauma survivors, any number of things. And ultimately, even though you want to help people with your best intentions in mind, they may kind of feel like you're preying on them potentially, or they may even be trying to prey on you. It just depends on the dynamic of that scenario, and only you can tell what that scenario actually is. But also, there's a difference between supporting someone and carrying them, picking them up on your shoulders, and you doing all the work, right? Because ultimately, if you are going to help someone, you have to help them, right? You have to help them without doing everything for them, because they have to have that sense of ownership. Because ultimately, we can't help them beat addiction. They have to do that on their own. We can't help them do any number of things that they are going to have to do, right? They have to, you're right, they have to make the choice that they want to move forward. You can't want them to heal more than they do, because you're not the person who's dealing with the healing. You're not the person doing the healing. That person has to have the motivation. They have to have the heart. They have to have the drive to get it done. They have to believe that it can get done. Now, is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. It's not going to be easy. Anything worth doing is not easy, right? It's going to take time. It's going to take effort, right? But they have to want it more than you do. And some of you, if you're an empathetic person like I am, you want people to get better. You want people to move forward and get the energy and the strength to go forward and do what they need to do. I'm a believer in people. I love people, right? I do, absolutely do. I want the best for people. I want the best for everyone. And ultimately, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I mean, we don't know what they're going through ultimately. I mean, we see that they're struggling, sure, but we don't know exactly what they're going through unless we ourselves have gone through it, I think. And so it's not like I'm telling people, hey, I know what you're going through. I know exactly, I would never say that to someone, especially if I've not experienced, the addiction issue or any other issue that's holding them down, right? Because some of those issues can be really hard demons to fight and really difficult and really painful. And a lot of it probably needs a professional. But also, it's nice to have a friend that you can count on and trust to be able to say, hey, I'm struggling today, and maybe you can get their mind off whatever they're dealing with, even for a little bit of time. And ultimately, yeah, I mean, I think we all have the power, but ultimately, I think the biggest thing is you have to fight the battle in your mind first. You have to believe that you're going to get this, that this is going to work, and that you deserve it. I think ultimately, a lot of people, it's not that they don't necessarily have the willpower to fight it. It's that they don't believe that it's going to work because they've tried before and failed. And so they feel like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? What is all this about? I don't really want to do this. Is this really worth my time? And then also there's a difference between loving someone and fixing someone. Because ultimately, I think a lot of people would take offense to you saying, I'm trying to fix you. No one can fix anyone unless they want to be fixed. And ultimately, it almost sounds kind of condescending if you think about it, right? Just love them, love them, give them time if that's what you want to do. Be there for them, walk alongside them, do life with them if that's what you want to do. But ultimately, don't be their savior, right? No one wants to be like, oh, yeah, I have a savior, I have this person who's going to do everything for me and take care of me and I won't have to worry about anything. But where is their buy-in? If they are not fully involved, then what's the point? It's just another thing that you are actually taking care of for them, rather than them taking the driver's seat and deciding what they're going to do, what's best for them, and what works for them, right? And ultimately, the other thing you think about is empathy and hope can become self-abandonment because you are so enmeshed and so like involved in this that you literally want this more than anything. And you're right. I mean, that is actually a thing to, yes. Yeah. I mean, if you have someone who literally is going from, warring with themselves to all of a sudden then at one point maybe seeing you as the enemy because you are trying to help them and they don't see that. Maybe they see, and also too, there's also probably a level of self-consciousness as well. Like, why is this savior person like coming into my life and trying to change things? Like, why is that? I don't know that I'm ready. I don't know that I can make that commitment. I don't know that, this will actually work. And, no one can give you guarantees but yourself, right? And so ultimately it becomes a scenario of, if that person is constantly warring with themselves, then they clearly need more than just, a person to walk alongside. They may need some, mental health counseling. They may need some, if they're struggling in the throes of addiction, then they may also need some substance abuse help too, or any number of things, or trauma help, because ultimately I found in my work as an attorney that generally a lot of the people that I've seen in, criminal situations and addiction issues and all that, a lot of them do struggle with trauma, and that is kind of the hidden piece. And I know that a lot of us experience trauma, and it happens in it's very regular, obviously, unfortunately. And that can be something that can be difficult to overcome, but it can be overcome in some ways. And we can grow in spite of it rather than because of it, right? So we can actually grow even if we have trauma, if that's what we want to do. And yeah, reassurance doesn't always work, but trying to be as positive as you can and being there for that person and maybe talking through stuff. But yeah, definitely sometimes professional help is the way to go if that's what it requires. And then the hard truth, as we all know, you or I, even though we love that person and we want that person to change, they're not going to change based on our efforts. They have to be fully participating. They have to be fully invested. Investment is huge. Skin in the game, so to speak, is huge. Absolutely, yeah. Empathy is very important. I mean, I think that empathy, you can't want to help somebody unless you have some sort of empathy, unless you kind of understand where they're coming from in the same way. I mean, you won't understand fully unless you've struggled with addiction. But even if you haven't, I mean, there's certain things that are very similar. All of us have a vice in some way. Some people have a work vice. Some people have a people vice. Some people have a relationship vice. Some people have, any number of vices, right? And so, yeah, you have to say, I know we all struggle. I know we all struggle at certain times in our life. That doesn't make us weak. It just gives us an opportunity to level up, to be better, to be the people that we want to be. And that's extremely important, right? To be the type of person. You only get one life. So let's live it to the fullest, and try to be as positive and honest as you can. But ultimately, they have to know that they have to participate. This isn't going to be you dragging them along. This is going to be you and them working together, and you providing encouragement when needed and such. But it's ultimately their show, and they decide what happens, and they decide how long it's going to take, what their route is going to be, what the best case scenario is for them. And that's what they work toward. And then also, let's talk about the grief piece too. Sometimes people get this idea, they look at someone and they see all of their potential. And clearly that person, whether or not they have low self-esteem or what it is, or they have been essentially mistreated a lot in their life, they may not see that. And so you're that person who's telling them, look, I mean, you have so much potential. I mean, you have this and you have this and you have this and you have this, and you're so smart. And like, you realize, I mean, you're just like building them up, and they're like, oh no, I'm stupid. Like, I'll never get here. I'll never get here. I mean, I don't know. I just want to give up. I just want to give up. I just want to give up. And ultimately that can be some people's reaction. I know I have a relative who was going through some medical things. Right. Exactly. And that can be difficult. Like going through all that, you don't, because you don't fully know. I don't fully know, to be honest with you. So, I mean, I've never been addicted to anything. So, but from what I do know, I mean, yes, it is hard based on what I've seen with some of my criminal clients. And ultimately, they're not bad people. They're just people who probably dealt with trauma and didn't have a strong background, so to speak, or have people who were willing to look out for them. And that's how they coped. And that coping mechanism then became a crutch. And that can be a difficult crutch to break. I think one of the scariest things that I've learned in the criminal defense world is the fact that the first time that you do methamphetamine will be the biggest high you get. From then on, everyone else is always chasing that high again, which is kind of sad. But I think that a lot of people struggle with like loneliness or sadness or just not feeling like they're good enough. Maybe they didn't get a lot of encouragement at home. I mean, I think the family systems, that's why they're so important, because families can make or break someone. They can damage them for the rest of their lives, or they can build them up. So that's something that you would have to pray to God about. If you want to know the answer, you have to trust your own judgment. I'm not here to judge anyone else. I'm not judging anybody else at all, period. I'm trying to figure out things. See, Cody weighed in. So, and sometimes you put in all this work, and I'm not saying this in a negative way. Sometimes you can find yourself putting in all that work, and then they're like, yes, I am. You find yourself putting in all that work, and then the person is like, yeah, I'm not going to do this. And so then it's like, not because you put in a lot of work. I mean, you literally wanted to help that person. So this isn't coming from a place where, oh, you disappointed me. I don't like you. That's not what it's coming from. But you put in all this work and then you realize you're like, oh, the grief piece, right? The grief piece, because you invest in someone, you care about someone, which is why you wanted to invest in them. Not for anything that you were going to get from them, because you weren't looking to get anything. You were doing it out of the goodness of your heart. And then you realize they're not wanting to go forward with that. They don't feel like they're good enough. They don't feel like they're capable. They don't feel like they deserve this. And that's when things hurt so bad, because you realize. I agree with that. I think you set your mind to what you're going to do, and you believe that it's yours. You believe that it's going to be so successful you're not even going to know. I mean, it's just going to be crazy. But yeah, I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney. I have 2 podcasts. One of them is Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. We talk about family roles and things like that, and truth telling and fake nice and things like that. And then my second one is Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. It's a true crime channel where I do analysis on criminal cases, such as like Scott Peterson, Darlie, Susan Smith, Casey Anthony, and other cases. So yeah. And they're both on YouTube. If anybody's interested in checking those out, feel free. So the grief piece is realizing that you can't force someone to be saved who doesn't want to be saved. Whether that's because of trauma, whether that's because they just don't want to. They like their current lifestyle. They don't feel like they'll ever get out from under it. And that hurts. And I've had people, I had somebody comment on one of my podcasts about how, well, now everybody who's hopeless, like they're going to feel hopeless now that no one cares. And I'm like, that's not what it's about. It's not about throwing someone away. It's about feeling sad because you know what they could do and what they're capable of. But you can't reach them. You can't get them to, to do better for themselves. Right? And that's sad. I mean, that is extremely difficult. And I mean, that is grief. I mean, that is literally looking at someone and being like, oh my goodness, like, I want to help you. But then you also think, is it because they're ashamed because they don't want to be your project or feel like you think you're better than them? And I think that that's some of it too, because people are just kind of self-conscious about certain things. Yeah. And I think, sometimes I don't think that the people who are the powerful people, so to speak, a lot of them just discount people, because that's what they do. I mean, they don't really look to what's good for everyone, because, there's a lot of dynamics going on and all of that. And a lot of people look at, I know that I've represented, like I said, people who struggle with addiction. They're not bad people. They're just struggling. It can be, yeah. And you have to definitely set your mind to it. I was taught that at a young age, that if you set your mind to it and you keep going forward, I mean, you may not get there overnight, but it's going to happen. I mean, if you keep moving the needle 1% each day, you're closer than you were, and I'm a firm believer in just, trying to build others up, not tearing others down. But I think sometimes social media can be a double-edged sword. I mean, it can be great, it can connect you to people, which is fantastic. I love this. But it can also be negative because people want to read what they want to read into certain things. And that's their prerogative. That's their right. Yep. Can be for sure. It just can be kind of difficult at times to go through some of that stuff. You know what I mean? The strong survive is what they say, right? So you just got to keep. And so for those of you that are interested in my lives, I do go live on TikTok at 12 p.m. each day. And then I go live on YouTube at 12:30 usually. So, and then also I have 2 podcasts I talked about. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check those out as well. But the other thing too is ultimately sometimes we see things that aren't there because we give people a lot more grace and a lot more we see them a lot differently than how they may actually present, right? And so what I'm saying is sometimes we see potential where really it might just be wishful thinking. And I hate to say that, but I think that a lot of times that's possible. And so when you realize that what you're seeing is actually not what is actually there, that can be difficult. And so then you deal with that. Sean, were you expecting someone? Sean. They went to the front door. So that can be really difficult, right? Seeing rust in the desert, yeah. Or a body of water in the desert, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get some water, and then nope, you didn't. So sometimes you can see things that you want to see because you want it so badly, and you want it for that person. So essentially, then you letting go of that part, you know, of seeing the potential because they don't want to act on their own potential. And also the other thing you got to think about is you could be committing to someone who is comfortable where they are. They have no motivation to change. They have no desire to move forward and put in the work. And I was saying I had that with my relative who was struggling, and they just didn't want to change because it would mean a lot of work, and they were a person who had more of a sloth-like personality, and they really weren't into wanting to go through, you know, life-saving procedures potentially, and they had even waited, and I was very upset. And I know, and then somebody said to me, they're like, you know, it's not your life. It's not your life, right? They have free will over their own lives. So sometimes we want more for people than they want for themselves. And that can be an extremely hard place to be in, especially when you love that person, especially when you're definitely, you know, not enmeshed, but when you're close to that person, or they mean a lot to you, you know. And at some point, helping them can start to potentially start hurting you because of the sadness and because of feeling like you failed. You may actually take it as a personal failure rather than something that they decided they wanted to do on their own. Yeah. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who would rather kind of just want to be left alone, you know, maybe because they don't want to burden other people. They don't want to be a bother. But at the same time, I think there's a loneliness there that oftentimes they don't really want to, I guess, explore or go into. And so, I don't know. I think that, I don't know. I just don't understand why people don't want to just keep kind of, leveling up and doing better. So I did post a short on this, I believe, in TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. And I'm going deeper in a full breakdown here because the pattern, it keeps a lot of good people stuck, right? You know, and I think that's, yeah, it is definitely true. So today we were talking about why you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved and why that hurts so much. I think that I have a series I've started. I've called it The Rescuer of Wounded Birds because I would pick up a lot of wounded birds throughout my life. I started that as a child and then just kind of continued because I wanted to help people. And I wanted people to understand that they were worthy and that they were important and that no one was a throwaway person and that everyone deserved it by nature of being a human being and that they were worthy and they were valuable and that they deserved a chance to live the life that they wanted to live, because I do feel that every single human is valuable. And I do think that we need to be better to our people. But the difference is you can't really save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I know people have taken that as a mean way, but I don't. I don't know. I feel like I'm in a good place. That's why I started doing my podcast. I wanted to help people, wanted to talk through ideas with them, and wanted to offer them encouragement because that's what I do. And I enjoy people. I love people. You all have been very kind to me and supporting my podcast and supporting my lives. I appreciate it. But also it's just, I don't know. I just think it's important to kind of teach people certain concepts and talk to them about certain concepts that they may not know or have experience with. But ultimately, you know, the thing I go back to is when you're in the airport, what do they say when you're in an airplane? What do they say to you in the airplane? I don't care if you have your 10 kids with you. You put your face mask on first, and then you put on everyone else's, which sounds so counterintuitive, especially for women, because, you know, women are caretakers and caregivers, and they're used to taking care of their children before anything else. And so that's an interesting perspective. But just like this, you know, in this scenario, it's like you have to know the difference between supporting someone versus carrying them. And ultimately, the only person that we can carry is ourselves. Hello, say Griezmann. Well, guys, I appreciate you all very much. And I hope that you will come back and see me again, maybe tomorrow at noon on TikTok and 12:30 on YouTube here. So again, I appreciate every single one of you. And I appreciate all the support, and I hope you'll come back again and see me again. Again, my name is Buffy, and I have 2 podcasts, Grace and Gavel, and which is True Crime, Where Truth Meets Compassion, and then Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. I will be dropping the How to Get Out of the Role here shortly, so stay tuned for that and some shorts. So thank you so much, guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Right, Carrie, there you go. You're strong, Cody. Congratulations. Bye, guys. Come back and see me again soon. Have a great day. Thank you.